All right, Anekeen, go through your delivery here. Okay, in your leg lift, what I'm looking for in the leg lift is that your momentum is starting towards the plate, okay? So when you come into your leg lift, be careful going high because we're just getting stuck. We're just staying here. I know there's been big leg lifters at high levels, but they are really good at really picking up energy. So if you can do it like that, that's fine, but just make sure as we go forward, if you're having a hard time getting your energy going and getting what we call the force vector, the ankle to knee, into a position to push force that way, it could be because you're balancing up too much, or you're not starting early enough getting your energy going. So see, as you come out right there, you really haven't gone much anywhere. So a big leg lift like that really works when you fall, and it adds more of that momentum. But if I go big leg lift and then I go back down, it doesn't really do anything. It's more of like a show than it is adding to it. So you came out and you're kind of here. It's still not in a position to where your shin can push now, or your back leg can push and drive your hip through. So you're gonna have to keep falling. The problem is if this is getting ahead, if it goes too far ahead, it starts to open, and when this opens, this turns, and basically all that momentum you're trying to build is gone at that point. So you can see it's starting to open, and that's starting to turn down, and so this is turning before any type of push or drive through the back hip. And what that's going to do, it's not going to put optimal power through your hip rotation. Because what we're trying to do in any movement of throwing or hitting, we're trying to build energy up off the ground, and we're trying to sequence it in that direction too, in that kind of like a domino effect. Boom, 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 right? So if before we push the energy up, we start the sequence, then we get less energy coming up the machine, right? So it's like the whip. If I took a whip and here's the handle and the whip's hanging down, to start a whip, I want to pull it up to get the end of the whip going back, and then I want to drive it down, right? And it creates that separation between the handle and the end of the whip, and then that whip has to catch up and create all the energy. So if I just took the whip and I just went like this, didn't put a lot of energy through it, but I sequenced it correctly, as opposed to sequencing it correctly and putting a lot of energy to it, which one gives you more power? So the sequencing is when you rotate. When you rotate, that's the sequencing. So if I sequence without really moving and putting power in, and sequence correctly, but it didn't throw hard. To sequence it correctly and throw hard, I got to put power into it and then sequence it, just like the whip, right? So the moment I see this open, this rotate, and no power, it's like you just took the whip and just went like that, right? So you didn't get all the power into the movement. So that's why coming out of leg lift, we've got to be moving a little bit more aggressively, and then through the day, you might not have that explosiveness in your body, because the more I try to get out of my leg lift, the more it's going to hit my front foot. And if my front foot knows it can't handle all that power, or that force in my leg, I'm not going to do it. So what happens is you take a guy like you, and I start pushing you, getting you going, it doesn't work because you start hitting front foot and you start collapsing, and you can't handle all that energy, right? So it's a two-way street. You got to learn how to get going, but you got to have the ability to catch all that force and transfer all that force. Make sense? So we were saying with him, like, he has good spin rate. I see good movements in his body. It's just if he wants to get high velocity, these are the things that have to come into the movements. He has to get the strength and the power. So when he moves dynamically, his body can catch it and stabilize it and transfer it. Make sense? Okay, so like you said, you're rotating before driving. So there's not a lot of power there. And you can see, when I see this leg kind of sinking behind your front leg, there really wasn't that propulsion into your front leg to really catapult all your energy. So you're just kind of spinning, and then it's going to be just a lot of arm at that point. I mean, I think you do good at throwing your trunk forward, but it's more forced forward. It's not catapulting forward, right? So get front foot here, and at that point you have good separation, and that's why you have, I mean, your ball looks really clean, because You're doing one key thing and you're separating. That's really good hip and shoulder separation, but it's more rotational. It's more, I separated in rotation. I didn't drive and separate. Okay? So let's see how it sequences. And this sometimes tells us everything. I don't know what it's going to tell us, but sometimes it'll tell us everything, which it does. Like, for example, this is a linear sequence. So this is when the glove, hip, which is red, and trunk and arm are going forward. This is when hip, glove, trunk, and arm are rotating. Okay. So in rotation, we did see your hip go forward, but it went with your glove. And when I see them go with the glove, they're actually kind of working together. And that tells me, if I see that glove going early, the trunk's going to want to rotate a lot. But I think your trunk is also going forward. Let's see. Yeah, it still goes forward too. It's rotating and going forward. I mean, here's the thing. The trunk movements and upper body movements are great. It's just, if we can get the glove to go with the trunk and not separate of it, you see how that glove is pulling down?
So more of like here?
Well, if we can get it to where this goes and then these go together, so you see this is all going together as opposed to this goes, and then that goes, right?
So more synchronized.
This and that goes together, but that won't happen until you put more power behind that hip. If I take that hip and I push that power up to that glove will shut off. Because what's happening is the hip is rotating, but it's not a lot of power. It's just kind of collapsing and rotating. So the glove's trying to help out that rotation, right? So if we can get a lot of more power through that rotation, more linear power through that rotation, that glove will just chill out and then ride with the trunk. And so you can see the linear power of the glove here, or even back to here probably. Let's see when it's peaking. No, it's here. So the power in your glove here is equal to your trunk going forward. Okay, so we would like to see in a kinematic sequence of where it builds up, we'd like to see the hip come over here. So the hip goes through here, then the trunk and glove go forward, and then the upper body go. And that's the interesting thing. Why do you think in angular sequencing, the hip and shoulders are farther apart, but in linear sequencing, like a domino effect, the hip and trunk are more together?
Can you go by that again? So what's the difference between the linear and the?
Well, I'm wondering what y'all think. Why do you think? I know why. Why do you think the hip and trunks in angular sequencing are farther apart?
What do you mean by angular?
Rotation.
Rotation.
Yeah. Rotation.
Okay. At what point they're rotating?
Yeah. So like, look. So look, the hip is peaking in rotation here.
Okay.
And then all the way out here, the trunk is peaking in rotation, but the linear speed is already gone in the trunk. So why is the hip and trunk separated more rotationally than it is linearly? So rotationally would be, why is there more of a separation here to here than here to here?
High separation.
Why do you think there's less separation in the forward movement?
Core strength?
Well, yeah, that could apply, but I'm talking like in the motion itself.
In the motion?
Why is that? So that.
Because what I see is happening is the hip is just it's not pushing force forward. It's more just rotating, and then the trunk is rotating and going forward. If there was more rotation and drive, then you would see this going off earlier than the trunk.
So more like push off in the back foot.
So it's not pushing
getting
enough.
more force forward.
There's no momentum from back there. Yeah. There's no momentum.
It's just rotating.
Rotating and going inside the linear.
So we see really, really great rotational movements, but we see
there's
average
no
linear
transfer.
movements.
There's no transfer energy, basically.
Yeah.
What you're saying.
So the point is, and it creates an illusion. Like a coach will see all this and be like, it looks perfect, but then when you see the linear energy, it's barely there. There's no force down the mountain. Right? Makes sense? So that's why your velocity, that's why your spin rates are beautiful. Like the ball moving out of your hand and Your arm action is beautiful because you have really good angular sequencing, but there's no force behind it because you have really average linear sequencing.
So let's define. Could you please define linear sequencing?
So, like linear sequencing would be dominoes. Like dominoes.
Going this way.
Boom, 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 boom. Right. And angular sequencing would be like it's a rotational sequence, like a gears, right?
To generate the other one.
Right. So we move two ways. We move this way, this way, this way, and we move this way, and then that way. So we're trying to maximize them
And
both.
the linear is pretty short. It should be long, is what you're saying?
Yeah, the linear is really short.
So
See how they're closer together?
They're closer right there.
And then the angulars. So he's separating the angulars good, but he's not separating the linears good. So when the linears are going, they're kind of going together, but the angulars are separating really well.
And how can you tell with the graph that they're separating? What are you seeing?
So you see the peak of the hip is here, and this is, 0.62 seconds, and then the trunk comes here at 0.75, and here the hip peaks at 0.65 or so, and the trunk peaks at 0.7. So you can see that peak and that peak.
And the peak
is
is what?
tighter.
The speed at that point? The speed
The
of the
speed
movement?
of the movement, but forward. This is forward. This is
Those need to be
rotational.
more, like the peaks need to be more aligned.
No, the peaks need to be more separate. Like the
It should
whip.
be like bang, bang, bang.
Yeah,
Is that what you're
and
saying?
it climbs, boom, boom. And you see that here, bang, bang, and then the arm is going to go up here. But here you're seeing boom, boom, boom. It's
Happens very quickly.
It's very quickly.
So there's no development.
There's no momentum going forward. It's sequenced well, but there's no momentum pushing it forward.
So basically what you're saying, because there's not enough power coming from the
From the
legs.
legs. Yeah. Make sense?